Hi, good evening. I think the afternoon is winding down a little bit. We still have a little bit more programming. We have this, and then there's another panel afterwards. And I know people are already enjoying the wine and the beer out there. I'm Paul McLeary. I'm the National Security and Pentagon reporter for Politico. I'll introduce the panel in a second. That's when I introduce the topic of the panel. So obviously, Secretary Rutte today said he's looking at 3.5% of GDP for defense spending coming up. It's kind of the counterproposal to the Trump administration's new insistence of 5% defense spending, which is a large, tough target. In the United States right now, so at 3.4, to get to 5, we'd have to spend $1.5 trillion on defense. We could do it. We'd go into even more debt. There's, different countries have different debt loads, different abilities to spend this. Obviously, Poland is over 4. Lithuania is 4 and going to 5. France has always been a high spender. We'll see if we can all get to 3.5 or 5%. So I'll introduce the panel quickly. We have Tomasz Szatkowski, who's the Polish NATO ambassador until last year. We have Lithuanian Defense Minister Dovilė Šakalienė. Okay. And then we have Xavier Chatel, the Macron's advisor for strategic affairs. So we'll kick this off with maybe a question for Poland here, who's been a big spender over the past several years, buying a lot of equipment from South Korea, fighter jets, long-range fighters, things like that. We obviously know why you're doing this. Curious how high you think you can get here, and how you think the Polish government is molding these buys to really meet, and not just to spend money, but to meet needs of air defense, long-range fighters, and things like that. How are you? What's your strategy for defense spending?
Yeah. So first of all, even though we never strayed much from 2%, we're always around 2%. Still, when the 2022 came, we understood that we need to pay up more. We need to ramp up the production, the spending. Short and medium term, we have to make up and catch up with what has been missing in terms of the spending for a number of years. So this is a kind of a short and medium term horizon. I don't think we can sustain 5%, sort of long term.
Sure.
And the aim is basically to build like I would say, fortress of the eastern flank. So basically, Poland being the linchpin of the eastern flank, being able to provide a safe haven for the Allied forces to arrive and to reinforce either Baltics or down south to Lithuania. That requires, as you have said, integrated air missile defense. We're procuring 8, but it's actually 16 batteries of Patriot. We're procuring dozens of medium range air defense systems and so on. And we are also procuring the largest rocket artillery capacity in Europe. This is to impose the cost on the possible aggressor, so that they don't choose, how much they. Basically, we can hold them at risk. This is the strategy.
And Madam Minister, Lithuania, much smaller country, much smaller budget overall, but the Baltic nations, and you in particular, have always punched above your weight. Obviously, you're spending a lot. What's the big what are you looking at coming up next for what air defense? I think is probably a big one, right? So, what kind of investments are you looking to make in the near term?
I think that one of the important things is not to start comparing different kinds of weapons, different kinds of systems. We had quite an irrational discussion, tanks versus drones, which doesn't make sense at all, because we know that multi-domain fighting is what we need to do, and we need to cover everything. And also we are talking about collective defense. So burden sharing, these words that scare everybody quite a lot. But at the same time, these are the words that are going to guarantee our efficient defense. So in Lithuania, I don't like to beat around the bush, so I'm going to be honest. We have had quite a big disproportion between our awareness of a threat coming from Russia and our defense spending. I wish that we would have kept 2% all the time, but we didn't. And therefore, for the past 5 years, I think we are very much on track. But 10 years ago, we weren't where I would like for us to have been. So currently, we are developing our first national division, which is based on land forces. And we are getting tanks, that I mentioned, but also we are getting different other systems because we need to cover certain piece of ground as best as we can. So yes, it's from tanks to HIMARS, to Shoreds, to NASAMS, to drones, to electronic warfare systems, and etc. It's going to be as much as we can carry that weight. And it's not about actually trying to make 5%, because 5% is the trend in the political talks right now. But it's because we made a very careful shopping list, assessed and reassessed from my first day in the ministry, which was 2 months ago. And what happened is that we realized with the size of our economy, with the dynamics of our GDP, divided until 2030, which we see as the date by which we need to have all the systems in place, it makes from 5 to 6% GDP. That's how we got that number. But at the same time, what we are also doing is we are working on our infrastructure. As a host nation, we are doing a lot, about the German brigade, and we have, very intense work going on, and I think that we are known for being a good host nation, and we need to improve that even more, but also our national infrastructure, our personnel. We need to expand significantly number of people in our army. We are also now seeing how we could use reserve more efficiently. That also needs funds. I'm talking a lot to my Nordic colleagues, and I'm going to go to Finland and also to learn about some more techniques, how we could work with reserve as well. So therefore, what I want to underline, there is no silver bullet. We are going to spend a lot, and we will need maybe even to do more. We will need all to work together, and we need to cover all our bases.
And Xavier, France occupies a bit of a unique position here on this panel in that you are a defense manufacturing powerhouse, right? The Caesar long-range fighter planes, tanks. What role do you think your government can and should play in, while you're spending more, but also selling to NATO countries and trying to help other countries build up and build this kind of capability that everyone's been talking about, where it's interoperability, not interchangeability, right? It's kind of similar platforms across the alliance.
So, first, France has consistently had a relatively high level of expense in defense, just because we have the nuclear deterrent, which means we have, independent submarines, aircraft carrier, and space capabilities and missile capabilities. So that sets sort of baseline of pretty high expense, and also because we've had consistently an expeditionary capability. We've been involved in wars in different geographies for as far as I can remember. So that requires us to have a certain level of defense expense that we've always had. That said, we had, with the decrease or deceleration that was after the end of the Cold War, of course, we had to, repair and increase our capabilities, especially after the aggressions against Ukraine of 2014, and then again in almost 3 years ago now. We've doubled our defense budget across the terms of President Macron, and that makes a sizable defense budget in Europe. And to your question on being an arms exporter and trying to have, a degree of homogeneity across European countries, I think it's a key question. It's a key question because unless we have an autonomous European industry able to manufacture what we need, we will not be able to have the mass and the depth that we need. And our recent defense programming law is a lot about that, about ensuring that we have mass in case we have a large-scale confrontation in Europe or elsewhere. And if you want to have that, you need the Europeans to use the same equipment, to use the same aircraft as much as possible, the same tanks, the same ammo, because then they can use that depth to lend one another, to also to take from their export markets, because they have their assembly lines still functioning. They can reclaim some from the customers who might accept to give them back because you need them elsewhere. And this can be achieved only if you have a baseline of European industry, which is free from export control or any other strings attached from other countries whose security is not correlated with ours. So if we buy our stuff from countries, for instance, in Asia, or whose center of gravity is going to be looking towards Asia, once there's going to be a contingency in Asia, everything will go there, and we will be deprioritized. So we have with certainty what we produce, and that should be our goal, to produce what we need.
And this can be a bit of an open swim. I'll throw this to the group. After 3 years of war in Ukraine now, all three of your countries have given quite a bit of equipment to the Ukrainians, donated it. And while you're replacing what you've donated, you're also trying to build yourself up with new weaponry, new modern weaponry. How difficult, how delicate of a balance is that in doing both? Helping a country at war, in a great power of war, while also planning ahead for yourself in a reasonable way that can be sustainable. I don't know who wants to jump in.
So that's actually a very important question, inconvenient, and to the point. We will have even more problems in the coming year or two if we do not ramp up our defense industry production levels. And we are not there yet. I have spoken, I think on Friday, when I came here to BDI, to German Defense Industry Association, and one of the things that I ask them to do is to be even smarter than governments and faster than governments, because it is quite possible, and it would be done, that weapons will be produced during war, but building factories, building new production lines, it's easier to do that before the war starts. So I really encourage to do that. And in a year or two, we will be pushing each other, by shoulders, standing in lines for equipment. Now we are already having long waiting lines. And the demand is growing very fast as realization dawns that, okay, guys, United States is going to participate in defense of Europe, but United States is not going to be our defense. We need to make our defense there. And that's why both developing European defense industry, working with United States defense industry, and also being quite realistic that, of course, United States are going to want us to buy from them, and we will have to find a balance. But at the same time, using industrial cooperation to the new levels and building closer to the front line what we need to have. Because in my opinion, we have a chance to avoid physically war on NATO territory only by being absolutely ready for it, to the last bullet, to the last gun in our hand. So what we're doing in Lithuania, actually, we are now working on our defense industry as one of the main priorities. This is on my agenda. This is on the agenda of our Prime Minister. So we are making now 3 clusters of defense industry. First, ammo and explosives. Second, heavy equipment and maintenance of heavy equipment. And third, drones, all possible kinds of drones, but there could be more. And what we are now doing also, for example, in Lithuania, we are buying both from Europe and United States. Caesars from France, tanks from Germany, NASAMS, CV90s from Nordics, and etc. We will have to play also a real political game. Let's not be naive. On the other hand, what you said, being much more compatible, this is critically important. But realistically, every nation is going, especially a big nation, is going to try to protect their own industry in the times where we need to actually unite. And the thing is, which would be probably helpful in my opinion, to realize that we need so much that it's not a competition between the nations. It's just let's produce as much as possible Panzer howitzers and Caesar howitzers. We are going to use them all.
Okay. And
yeah, you asked about the balance between supporting Ukraine and sort of reconstituting our own capabilities. Well, we all know that supporting Ukraine's defense right now is probably the best sort of deal we can do. At the same time, this balance can sort of shift when it comes to countries that are, for instance, in the eastern flank. Yes? For instance, in the beginning of the Russian invasion, we as Poland, we donated well over 300 tanks, hundreds of other armored vehicles, and we found ourselves at a certain limit of our capacity, because right now we have to rebuild our capacities as we are bordering Russia, which of course will reconstitute at the same moment. So perhaps this is also a moment where some of the countries in the interior of Europe can sort of take over this lead, and in the long term, of course, we'll all have to continue to support Ukraine. But I also wanted to chip in on the role of the government, because I think the industry will not itself be able to expand its capacity. The commercial logic is not sufficient to address capacities in defense industry, because the commercial logic doesn't like redundant capacities. So it's the area where governments, I think, need to step in, for instance, to fund production lines or new solutions like government-owned, commercially operated, so that we have more capacity.
Can I chip in very shortly? So I just wanted to say that, of course, but one of the things is that from the government side, we need to send a clear message. We are going to need for the coming decade a lot. And sometimes certain governments make slower financial decisions. And for business, as I said, it's absolutely guaranteed possibility that everything is going to be bought. But secondly, politically, we need to change financial instruments. Banks, private banks, still don't see defense industry as their primary client, and they should. So, yeah.
And I think, this, not to go too down the rabbit hole of defense budgets, but I know in the United States a big problem is that defense budget's once a year thing, right? So that makes it hard for industry to say, okay, I can plan out, I can build a new line, hire 5,000 people for the next 5 years, because next year this Congress might change its mind. Xavier, how do you think this can be? Can you solve the problem? How can this be solved as far as like giving that demand signal to industry for the long term, so people can plan for the long term as opposed to year by year?
The essence of defense programming law for us is that we plan capabilities actually a very long time in advance. And when you look at those which are really structuring the defense budget, there are lines that will extend for the next, sometimes 50 years. So we're currently planning for our next aircraft carrier, and it's going to be online, like it's going to take decades for it to come online. And the capabilities which are going to go on it, the future aircraft, we're currently going to build it with Germany, and it's also long-term planning. So I think the essence is really long-term planning. Now that said, when you try to combine like this long-term state planning and contingencies, like we're going to have to help Ukraine, we're having to help Ukraine now, and we have to combine this with our structural lines of the way we conceive of our defense for 2030 plus, then we have to work with industry, and it's a partnership. So part of it is giving them contracts. Part of it is for them to take risks, because they also have to see that there's profit opportunities, and so sometimes they have to put some of the money forward. And we also have to help them with regulation, because sometimes we're over specified, we have too many regulations in terms of the equipment and under which temperature it should be able to operate, and et cetera, et cetera. And this we can simplify, but it's a partnership with industry.
And I would imagine watching the war in Ukraine, seeing this major conflict in real time and what works and what doesn't, right? This is going to change, I think, what governments will want to buy, but that's a pretty slow process, right? These first-person drones, DoD, I know, has talked about that for a decade, hasn't really done much about it, and now they're trying to catch up. Electronic warfare, again, I've talked to folks in DoD for a decade about this. didn't really do anything. Now they're trying to catch up. I mean, what are you seeing as far as changes about what you might want to buy and what maybe things maybe a few years ago you said, well, this will be important, and now maybe not so much?
So first of all, I mean, we need to continue on one hand doing what we have been doing. So the capitalizing on the strengths of the Western way of warfare. So the sort of offensive, agile maneuver warfare with air dominance, so exquisite platforms and so on and so on. But then again, we have to be ready for a more sort of attritional style of warfare, like in Ukraine. So we need to expand stocks. We need to indeed look at simplification of certain. In the area of drones, this is certainly such an area. We see some progress now in area of missiles, like cruise missiles and drones. Actually, this capability merging, sort of, and
drone rockets.
This is a very interesting trend. So basically, we need to do what we have done, but also do the other.
I mean, it's complicated because you don't want to design and build a military for this war in Ukraine. You know what I mean? You don't want to fight the last war. I know this war is ongoing, but you have to look to the future, right? And I think that's where EW comes in. As you mentioned, space, satellites. I mean, these are all going to be high-end, very expensive, very complicated platforms that are going to change over time. And no one has a crystal ball, but I mean, you mentioned the aircraft carrier. There's been a lot of debate over the future of aircraft carriers, if they're just expensive targets or if they're, floating runways that you can project power deep into the Indo-Pacific. So what do you see as kind of these expensive, long lead items that you might want, that might be hard to plan for? That, I mean, I guess you're looking at long-range fires, as you said, right? So I mean, as you look to the future, what do you say, well, in 10 years' time, maybe this is going to be what we really need. We need to invest now in this. I mean, these drones, like as you said, precision missiles. I think coastal defense also in the Baltic, that's a big concern too.
Yeah, but honestly saying, we don't know how a battlefield is going to look 10 years from now, because AI is going to be quite an important factor, which is going to change a lot. But currently, we are also in a geopolitical situation where we do not have 10 years. The moment that whatever kind of deal happens in Ukraine and Russia stops losing amount of soldiers and equipment that it is now losing in Ukraine, it will immediately accelerate accumulation of Russian forces. But it's already accumulating. It's finalizing its army's reform. Its defense industry is moving quite fast. Cooperation with China and other bad guys is quite efficient. So therefore, I agree with my Polish colleague. We have to be ready to fight the current war as well. And current war already taught us one important lesson, among others, is that let's not write down the importance of simple artillery. We are going to need that. We did, we are, and probably we will for at least quite some time. Other thing is certain innovations that we see are emerging, and then also absolutely agreeing what you said, buy in Ukraine for Ukraine, but I'd say buy in Ukraine for Ukraine and for us. I think that working with Ukraine on joint defense industry projects, because we do have technology, we have engineers, we have motivation, we have this capacity, and the rocket drones, I think it's a very good thing, and we really need to develop that and make a lot of them and buy a lot of them, among other things. So currently, not also make the jump, from it's not black or white. Let's keep what we need to do if we have to go to battle in 24 months, but also prepare for what we are going to need further. So R&D is very important too.
Right. And Xavier, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, the other day pledged U.S. commitment to NATO. He said, we're here. He said, in 10 years, we don't know. And I know your president has spoken a lot about European autonomy, right? But Europe doing it for themselves. And Jens Stoltenberg spoke about it. Rutte has been speaking about it. Europe taking the reins and doing this. What role do you think that your country and your government can play in not separating from the United States, but in really trying to build this autonomy and this European defense industrial base and identity?
We are not encouraging any decoupling whatsoever.
Right.
That's for sure. And it's not in our interest and not in the interest of the Europeans and of European unity, which is very important. And that said, we can do a lot in terms of spending more, which is the beginning of this conversation, than spending on our stuff. And here I will insist again, why can Croatia give Leopards to Ukraine? Because Germany can give Leopards to Croatia. Why can we give Mirage aircraft to Ukraine without asking permission to anyone? It's because it's made in France. So when you do stuff and it's made by others, you don't have the authorization, or your security needs to be aligned in all circumstances and in all cases with others, which cannot always be predicated. So this we can do, and then of course capabilities are only as good as the propensity to use them. And what we can work on is Europe's strategic culture and Europe's propensity to be involved, sometimes even directly in the security of Ukraine in this case. And that's precisely what we've been offering, a more direct involvement of the Europeans in ensuring that Ukraine will come out of this conflict viable, secure, and safe.
Great. Unfortunately, that's all the time we had. I really wish we had more time with 3 people. We have to plow through, but I appreciate everyone's time. This was really fascinating. And hold on for Suzanne Lynch, who will be coming up next. Thank you.
Thank